Thank you for joining me on another episode of She Leads Now, a podcast for women entrepreneurs and professionals who want to expand your innate leadership ability and influence, cultivate a culture of belonging and collaboration, develop others to perform at their greatest potential, and of course, live a life that is fulfilling, abundant, and impactful. I'm your host, Sabine Gideon. After nearly 14 years of climbing the corporate ladder as an HR professional and a leader, I became a corporate dropout and have spent the past several years helping organizations and leaders align their business goals with their talent strategies, strengthen their leadership bench, and create environments that employees actually want to be a part of. Tune in every Wednesday for insight, practical tools and strategies, as well as inspiring stories from other women leaders who have climbed the ropes and are now making a huge impact within their spheres of influence. Looking forward to chatting with you soon. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the She Leads Now podcast. I am so excited to bring you today's guest, Mary Hendra. Mary is an executive leader and entrepreneur, bringing curiosity, creativity, and compassion back into the workplace and into our spaces of adult learning. She is redefining play as she engages equally with moments of serious reflection and playfully letting go of assumptions about ourselves and others. Mary, thank you so much for being on the show. So excited to have you here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Sabine.
Before we get into how you incorporate or infuse play into your day-to-day, I would love for you to share with us a little bit about you, your background, and how you've navigated this career to become an executive.
Sure. So my career started really with knowing that I was interested in making a difference. A lot of young people say, I want to change the world. And that was definitely me. And I considered a number of different options, international, local, and ultimately chose local. So I started with Los Angeles County government. I had grown up in Los Angeles. County government is fascinating. It's one of these like invisible layers of civics that does so much and impacts our lives in so many ways that we generally don't see if it's working well. So that was where I started. I started in their management training program, continued with a number of county departments after that in management, and then felt like I was a little too far removed from the impact that I wanted to see. So I started volunteering. And when people talk about transitions, there's lots of different ways. Volunteering is one that people suggest gets you into exploring different things. And so I started volunteering. I negotiated my way into a job that would be 4-day work weeks. And then on the 5th day, I would volunteer and try different things. That led me ultimately to transition into teaching. And I was a teacher in public schools, both in Los Angeles and in Santa Monica, for about 8 years, during which time I again started probably pretty naturally, given that I had been in management before. I just was really attentive to what was happening around me, what I needed as a new teacher, but then immediately what others needed as new teachers. So I transitioned really into helping and supporting others who were new teachers, who were trying to break into being better teachers. And along the way, got to know a nonprofit called Facing History in Ourselves that develops curriculum, provides professional development for teachers. And at about my 7th, 8th year, they came to me and said, hey, we see you supporting other teachers. We know that you do an incredible job teaching our curriculum. Would you come work for us? And at first I said no. I'm happy in the classroom and I want to stay here. And then a number of things shifted during that year when they were looking for the next, person to join their staff. And so by the end of the year, I thought, you know what, I'll give this a try. I have now just left Facing History after 16 years with them. So giving it a try ended up being something that actually I leaned into all the way and felt like there were ways that I could support not just individual teachers, but whole teams, whole schools and districts, that I could really grow their program in amazing ways, both in terms of impact and in terms of the team that we created to do the work, and also in terms of visibility across the state. So that was a really powerful experience in my professional journey to be able to start in one position and grow into an executive leader for California in the field of education.
What an amazing journey, which I can imagine when we share it after the fact, it just seems so, oh yeah, that made sense, that every transition was a natural flow. But I'm curious to go from working in the county to really seeing a need. And it sounds like there was also an internal passion and desire to making that leap into teaching, and then to stepping away from that passion and that desire that you first had to supporting the teachers. If you can think back, what were those transitions like for you? And what was the driving force that propelled you to make those changes and also served as an anchor as you were stepping into this new uncharted territory?
Yeah, I love this question because transitions are hard and each one has been different from me. So when I worked for the county, originally I thought, okay, this is great. And I want to be a manager. And I loved managing people. I loved supervising and giving support and really creating things with a team. But at a certain point, it just wasn't fulfilling and energizing me in the same way. So the volunteering was because I had no idea what I wanted to do at that point. I actually had gotten a master's degree in international public administration while working for the county. So that seemed like it could be one field, but it just didn't feel like it was the right thing for me. So the negotiating that space so that I could try things out was really important. And I dove into that. So I became certified as a mediator, and I literally facilitated victim offender mediations where there were youth offenders and had been directed out of the criminal justice system. And I started volunteering for the LA Commission on Assaults Against Women and tried to learn from them how to help people recover from trauma and then help to avoid it. So I specifically worked a lot with them in the teen abuse prevention program, where we went out to middle schools to teach about relationships, both like the signs of an unhealthy relationship and how you create healthy relationships. And in doing this, I discovered, much to my surprise, that on the night before I was going into middle school to teach about trauma and abuse, right? So these are not like happy, uplifting topics. I was so excited I could barely sleep. And I had never seriously considered teaching before. I'm not somebody who knew I wanted to be a teacher early on. So it was very surprising. And I questioned myself, like, why am I doing this? Is this really going to be fulfilling? What aspect of this is fulfilling? I talked to teachers and principals and tried to get a better sense of what it might actually look like. And then knowing what I needed, I dove in by getting a second master's degree. Sometimes I wish I could trade two in for a PhD. But so I ended up getting a master's in education and my teaching credential in a way that I knew would give me the extra support I needed to make that transition. Since I had done nothing around teaching as a potential career, it was not even really on my radar. So that was the first transition. The second transition, going from teaching to working for a nonprofit, was interesting in that as I mentioned, they actually came to me and asked would I consider it. And I always love when that happens. That had happened once during the county as well, where somebody I had worked with early on came back and said, what would it take for you to come back to our department? Which is how I negotiated that position with Fridays off. So it was interesting when they came to me. It was something that I believed in, the work that they did. I was doing it in my classroom. I loved the teaching with other teachers, but it didn't entice me right away until there were some other things happening at the school that felt like they were not respecting me as an individual. And I wasn't able to show up as a teacher with my full self as a result. That constraint is what led me to say, let me reconsider this. And so we really engaged in several months of conversation and trial at different points for me to see what was happening, for them to see what I would be like in that position a little bit more before accepting the offer and making the transition there.
Wow. There's quite a bit there that I want to circle back to. And That's the piece around negotiating the 4-day work week. And in the space that we're in, so many women, so many individuals, they're trying to negotiate or wrap work around their lives versus work being the center. And so kudos to you for like really stepping in and owning and negotiating and saying, well, you know what, I need time to be able to figure out what I want to do next. And the only way that I'm going to be able to do that is to actually create it in my work week.
Can I add to that? I think sometimes we think of negotiation around those moments of transition. I know you have great insight into negotiation. We've had some really fun conversations about that. I also want to just encourage people to think about where they can negotiate even within their job. Because last year, there was something that I really wanted to do and would have cost money for registration, but it was mostly like it needed time. I needed to be able to do it. And so when I looked at what is most important to me in this, okay, I can request a scholarship, I can fund it myself, but I can't give myself more time. And so even though I wasn't changing jobs at that point, the desire to invest in my own growth led to some really good conversations with my supervisor and the creation of, okay, this is what I need, is that during this time, I am only going to spend 4 hours a day on work because I need that extra time to invest in myself and my learning. And was able to negotiate that for about a 5-week process so that I would have the time that I needed for my own growth in the middle of a job. So just, I wanted to pause on that because that element of negotiation is something that I think we sometimes forget that we can do even when we're not in that formal place of transition.
Yes. And I love that you brought that up. You're absolutely right. We can shift the mindset around what it means to negotiate. And so clearly you going through this professional development course was an asset to the organization. So positioning it in a way that allowed them to see, hey, this is a win-win situation here. I'm pretty sure it was supportive in helping you get it over the finish line. And also just the willingness to ask, right? Rather than saying, I can't do this, or it's never been done, or telling yourself they're probably going to say no. Just having that courage to simply ask and then engage in discussions to see how can it work. And it sounds like in both instances and probably several other, it worked out great for you. So thank you for that reminder that we always have the opportunity, the power, the ability to ask for the things that we need in support of our own growth and development.
There also is a little bit of luck, which I have since learned, especially from you and others, that it could actually be a very deliberate strategy. But for me, it was luck in that when in that first negotiation that we talked about, I was young. And now I see what they were doing. Like they would come to take me out to lunch. We sat in a booth where they were one on each side of me. So I was absolutely in the middle of them. And they were asking me these questions of what would it take and what did I want? And so there was an element of me knowing what I wanted. I wanted to be in a position where I was managing people. They'd been through this management training program. Theoretically, that was where I should go, but I hadn't gotten that offer yet. And so that was what I wanted. I wanted to be in that position. So knowing what I wanted was important. And then the luck part is they came with an offer and I just felt like I needed to think about it. So I was quiet and I asked for time. I sometimes just take time to think. And they gave me that time, but they also recognized that they needed to make it even a better deal for me. So my salary kept increasing in that proposal because I was being thoughtful and really wanted to make sure it was fully aligned and had all of the assets of a job that I wanted as my next job. And so I laugh at it now because I fell into something that increased my salary. But at the time, it was what I kind of being conscious of what I needed. So that grounding in what I needed actually ended up serving me really well in both the job creation and the salary that came with it.
Oh, I love that story. That you leveraging the strategy of silence without even knowing that that's what you were doing. Oh my gosh, that's such an amazing story. Thank you for sharing that. And so something that you said there too, I wanted to piggyback off of now transitioning into a leadership role. going through the actual hands-on training, having some experience, and now you're in a new role and you're managing other people. What was that transition like for you?
Yeah. So that was fascinating. I was maybe 23, 24, and they pulled together people that I could manage because I had been so insistent that this is what I needed to have. They pulled together one person who was maybe 5 years away from retirement, who nobody liked managing, right? So like, oh, great, you want to manage? Here's this one person. The second person was super ambitious, probably also somebody that others didn't want to manage because she was so like active, energetic, wanted to make things happen. And then a third where it was somebody who herself supervised the mailroom. So it was fascinating because those were the people that they gave me. But I came into it, I'd had all the management experience, sure, but in terms of the training, but I came into it with this genuine curiosity and compassion for the people. And I would like listen to them and I would ask them questions. And that one who was close to retirement, I discovered he had such a passion for the program that he led, which was around employee appreciation. And he put everything into that. When I looked at his performance reviews for the last 5 years, they were, I kid you not, verbatim word for word. The only difference was the date had been changed. So his supervisor had not even given him the courtesy of actually observing and documenting what this person was doing. But I was there as a new person. I saw that, and there was definitely the trigger of, I am not going to do that. But there also was like, this person deserves more. And I had already, I think, seen more in this person with these fresh eyes than anybody else had recently. So I wrote up a performance review that was new, that was authentic, that had areas where there were things that could be improved, which we had talked about already. So there were no surprises, but also had genuine appreciation for things that he was doing. And our conversation about that performance review broke any tension there had been, because there had been that tension, but seeing that the way that I had done that performance review, he was really just so willing to listen to the feedback, good and bad, because he knew that I was actually looking at him, not judging based on what other people had said. And there was a similar thing with the mailroom. Interestingly enough, like recently, my leadership style was described as fierce, which is not a word that I previously kind of associated with myself. But now hearing it, I look back to what I did even in this early management, and I see a bit of it because the mailroom was looked down on, but I was curious. I wanted to know, like, how did everything happen? I wanted to know, what did the mailroom supervisor need to really support her staff? I wanted to know the people who were in there. So I would be down in the mailroom and I would talk to them. And at one point there was someone from the mailroom who I knew, I think, really wanted to move out of there and do something. So we were able to have a lot of conversations, and I was able to fight for her to get a different kind of opportunity than she had previously gotten. And that kind of fierceness of protecting and supporting and raising up the team members that report to you or report through to you, that I love as a definition of fierce, because I truly believe we all should be, as leaders, advocates for the people that we are leading.
Absolutely. I particularly love the story around the gentleman who was just shy of retiring and had probably felt forgotten about and unseen, and you being able to step into that as a new leader at that and fighting through the obstacles of trying to, prove that you could lead. And so I'm curious, looking back, how much of your initial approach with him came from your learning, if you will, around management versus your innate ability to just relate to him and your team as human beings?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think there was a lot that was just me. It was how I approach people. And I am a bit of an introvert. And so I really cherished the one-to-one connections and really I'm curious and lean into learning one person at a time. The management training gave me, I think, greater confidence that there were different management styles and that I didn't have to emulate just a management style that somebody else had. And for that, I'm really grateful. And even at one point, we took the Myers-Briggs test, and I discovered that among managers in the county, I was in like the 2% category. Everybody else had a more dominant style. But just knowing that is helpful information because I could recognize, okay, I'm different. So what I see modeled by somebody else may not be what works for me. And that's going to be okay. So how can I use what I have and be able to do that in my own way? There are definitely things in leadership that were more of a challenge for me to bring into, but managing and working with people, oh, I love that.
Yeah. And it's so clear if you could see her, like she's just beaming right now as she speaks of that. And so it sounds even very early on in your career, stepping into a leadership position, or I should say, stepping into a management position really allowed you to tap into some of your inner leadership skills. So you got the management role that you wanted, you stayed there for a while, you got pulled right from a passion perspective into teaching and then stepped into this new role. And so 16 years is a very long time to be with an organization. So kudos to you. What was that journey like over 16 years to quote unquote climb the ladder?
Yeah, every journey is so different. One of the things that can be very fun is in a small nonprofit, you get to try a lot of things. And you have to, because there's only a certain number of people. I was involved with benefit dinners, evenings with donors, and I was involved in creating programs for teachers and workshops. And I was involved in hiring staff and mentoring and guiding. And I was involved in creating sales training for people across the organization. And one point was in regular communication with the superintendent of schools for California. And I think for me, what would define my journey is a willingness to play, a willingness to be curious and to try new things. So sometimes that meant playing with technology in different ways. And what could it look like if we connected teachers? This was 10, 12, 14 years ago. We were saying, like, how can we connect teachers online? Because Los Angeles is a pain to drive around. And our teachers on the West Side were not going to come to the event that we are having on the East Side. And so, how could we do that and leverage what was happening with amazing teachers across Southern California in ways that they could learn from each other and can network with each other? And that took some new technology. And then there were opportunities to meet with people who were in ed tech firms, ed tech entrepreneurs, and being able to imagine something so different that I could say, oh, like we could partner with you for this and get people excited about it, both internally and externally. Having that willingness, again, to play with the assumptions, we've done it this way, but what if we could do it even better? We're getting great reports from all of our evaluation feedback, but that didn't mean that we should stay and stand still. Fostering that culture of play with my team has resulted in the region being one of the most innovative across the organization, the only one in the United States that had its own blog at certain points where we could do it, the most active on social media with Twitter, the lead for partners with tech firms, but also a lead in revenue generation. And sometimes I don't think to mention that because in a nonprofit, that's not usually your first priority, but it is yet another indicator that we were successful.
Oh, that's awesome. I love the fact that you bring play into it and how it's coupled with curiosity. In most environments, it would get all labeled into innovation. But then when you say play, it takes away any pressure from having to be perfect or having to be successful or whatever, but it's just the space of exploration and imagination. As you can look back, right, to the young lady who went through the management training course, wanted to save the world, didn't know how, through different career journeys and opportunities, to the individual that you are today. What's one lesson, right, that you've learned for yourself that you're taking away from the journey, and one lesson that you would share for new and inspiring, or what I like to call emerging leaders who are just coming into that space and that awareness and maybe just getting that opportunity to exercise their leadership?
Yeah. So I think there's a commonality, I think, both for myself and for new and emerging leaders, that reminder to just constantly stay curious. I think there's so much pressure to be the expert, and I feel it now, and I think you feel it all the more as you grow in leadership, that you're looked to as the one who knows. And I think as a young person, I wanted to be that person. I wanted to be the expert, and I wanted to be the one that people came to as the one who knew the answer. But there is so much more power in staying curious. The world is constantly changing around us. The other people that we work with, especially if we hire in a way that really brings in diversity of experiences, beliefs, that curiosity is much stronger than being the expert in the room. The expert sense or desire can actually be a wall that prevents us from growing, prevents us from having as much impact as we want. But the cultivating that sense of curiosity, that willingness to challenge our own assumptions, is as important when you're 23 as it is when you're 53.
I love it. Thank you. And thank you so much for bringing up that point. It's almost like when someone steps into a leadership role, or even when they have been in a leadership role, this expectation and even self-imposed expectation that I have to have all the answers. Like I have to be the one to just figure things out, and really letting go of that to say, actually, I'm surrounded by a group of individuals who know things, right? And so taking off the cape, essentially, and allowing yourself to learn from others, allowing others to teach you and to bring forth experiences, ideas, innovations that you perhaps had not thought through. And I know that even in organizations, nonprofit and for-profit organizations, that not only do we have these self-imposed things, but it could be that the culture and the environment is requiring us to be the know-it-all. So being courageous enough to take that step back and say, actually, I don't have to be the person who knows everything. I'm going to surround myself with people who can help support me.
Yeah. And you're right that sometimes the pressure can be external, and having the courage to say, this is such a great question. I want to bring somebody else into the room too, which sometimes we think that diminishes our own power or authority. But to recognize the brilliance of others and to give space for others to also have voice and presence, I think is just so important.
Absolutely. And well put. So Mary, as we wrap up here, just a couple of real quick rapid fire questions for you. In terms of books, because I can tell you are a learner. So I'm curious, is there a book or maybe a couple books that have been pivotal or instrumental in your growth, in your development, or ones that you just find yourself frequently going back to?
Yeah. I do love books, and there are a number of great ones that I've been inspired by recently, including Priya Parker's The Art of Gathering, which I think can be very instructive when we even think about, why am I bringing together people for a team meeting, and how do I set people up for success? And a book by Amanda Ripley called High Conflict, where she talks about some of the ways we get into a cycle that divides and creates those deeper emotionally related divisions, which I think can often happen within organizations as well as in our broader society. But the one I've been recommending most during this time, during the last couple of years especially, is a non-traditional one for business. It would take your listeners about 30 minutes to read if they wanted to just flip through it. But it's one I go back to regularly, and it is The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. It has beautiful imagery and very simple language. And the reason why I think of it in relation to management and leadership is I find that individual pages, both the imagery and the words, can help me center on what I'm going through in a moment and be that mirror for self-reflection, and can help me have greater understanding and empathy for others and what each person is going through. in this journey of ours where we're experiencing things that are tough and that are inspirational. And the connections we form with others can be part of how we learn and how we grow and how we make it through. So that is my non-traditional recommendation.
Oh, wow. I'm not familiar with either one of them, so I'm definitely adding them to the list. When you talked about the images and being a short book, I don't know why it took me to Who Moved My Cheese, because that's one of the ones that I always recommend. And I'm like, it has pictures, trust me. And sometimes even as adults, right? It's those books that bring everything together for us. So thank you. I will definitely include the links to those 3 recommendations in the show notes. As far as any projects or anything that you're working on that you would like the audience to know, how can they connect with you?
Thank you for the question. First off, I love when women can continue to support and elevate each other. So I mentioned that I left the job where I'd been with the organization for 16 years. My next paths in my journey include a couple things, one of which is my own business. And so there is a website for that, maryhendra.com. I am responding really to where a lot of people said, how do you do what you do? You teach about really tough things, and yet you stay really centered, or you guide a team that's very different from you, and all of them shine. So how do you do these things? And the incorporation of play, the incorporation of really staying centered, finding those moments of stillness as well as creativity, having compassion has all been feeding into the work that I do with that, which I call Move with Grace. A sample of what I do can be downloaded at maryhendra.com/transform. So that's one way to stay in touch with me. And then the additional work that I'm going to be doing is with the California Global Education Project. And LinkedIn is a great way to stay connected and see what I'm doing there, which I'm also equally excited about because we're really looking at sustainability, at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and what it means to be sustainable both by community and civic engagement, and going back to that 20-year-old who wanted to make a difference to the world, as well as thinking about our environment that we're in and how all of that is important for us to be sustainable. The relationships, the economics, the environment, we need all of it.
I love the full circle of your journey through your career there. We'll definitely include the LinkedIn handle or the LinkedIn links, as well as your website on the show notes. And before I let you leave, any final words of wisdom to the audience who is listening now or who may listen in the future?
Just remember to be you. There are lots of people who are others, but you are the only one that can be you. Having the courage to bring you into whatever you're doing.
Oh, that's so great. That is such great advice. Well, thank you again, Mary, for joining us. Thank you all for tuning in. We will be back next week with another episode of the She Leads Now podcast. Until then, have a wonderful rest of the week. Talk to you soon. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of She Leads Now. If you found today's episode helpful or got a piece of insight that you plan to implement in your business or organization, I would love to hear from you. Connect with me on LinkedIn at Sabine Gideon, that's my handle, and send me a private message. Or feel free to go ahead and leave a review on either Apple or Spotify. I also invite you to share this episode with anyone in your network who you think might benefit from this content. Lastly, be sure to check the show notes and the description below for links to resources, including relevant downloads, articles, and any upcoming training. Until we chat again, have a blessed and powerful week.